Hello my dear students, welcome once again to the class of 10th English medium. The subject is social science, chapter 16, the second chapter of the economics portion of the 10th subject. The chapter is economic liberalization and globalization, presented to you by Vitan sir. Now in the previous tutorial we studied about what is economic development, what is economic growth, and the various systems of the allocation of the very small amount of resources, that was market mechanism, socialist economy, and the mixed system. Now in this chapter we are going to learn about the liberalization, privatization, and the globalization policies which were implemented by the Indian government in the year 1991. In the industrial policy of 1991, following reforms were implemented for the strengthening of economic development in the country. The first reform was liberalization, then privatization, and globalization. We will study all these three reforms in detail now. Starting with the first reform, that was liberalization. Now, what does the liberalization mean? The definition of liberalization is the reduction in the restrictions and controls imposed by government on private sector and providing encouragement to economic development. Now, in simple terms, whatever government restrictions were put on the private enterprises, they were reduced. That means if private enterprises were supposed to take licenses, then those licenses were removed. If there were some restrictions on the establishment of private companies, that restriction was removed. Liberalization in simple terms means making things free. In the image you can see the word free trade. So liberalization basically means the same thing, free trade. That means the private people can do business freely without restrictions. That was the aim, the goal of liberalization. Let's understand the steps taken under the liberalization scheme. The first one, the compulsion to take government permission has been removed for establishing industries, except for 18 reserved industries. Now, at a certain point of time when the liberalization was implemented, there were 18 reserved industries. Today, there are only 2 or 3 reserved industries. Even the remaining industries have been made open for the private industries. Areas other than railways, defense, and atomic energy has been opened for private sector, and recently railway has also been opened for the private sector. As you can see, the railway contracts, the private trains, the private tracks, the private platforms have been started being allotted to the private companies. The tradition of compulsory registration for industries has been removed, okay, and the provision taking government permission, the provision of taking government permission has been abolished for those industries which do not cause pollution or which are not hazardous. That means those simple non-hazardous, non-polluting companies which actually does not damage our environment, they don't need to take government permission for establishing themselves. So it has become very easy to establish such industries. Let's discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of the liberalization. Starting with the advantages, the first advantage, due to liberalization, private sector got an opportunity for development, leading to increase in production. Okay, so due to liberalization, the private sector got opportunity for huge development, and due to that the production, the overall production in the nation increased. The second advantage, that with the liberalization, the global trade has received a forward push. That means the global trade has increased due to the liberalized policy of the government. The third advantage, with increased foreign trade, there is increase in foreign reserves. Okay, so because the foreign trade has increased with the other countries due to the increase in the global trade, the foreign reserves has also been increased. Internal infrastructure facility, facilities improved due to liberalization. With the liberalization, the infrastructure facilities of the nation increased. The disadvantages of the liberalization are: first one, even with the decreased restrictions, the monopoly has not been controlled properly. That means the aim was to control monopoly, which has not been successful even with the liberalization. With focus only on industries, India has actually remained backward in the agriculture sector. The third one, the disparity in income has increased. That means the difference in the income of the higher level and the lower class has increased a lot. With increased imports and reduced exports, actually the foreign debts have been increased rather than foreign reserves. We just discussed that in advantages foreign reserves has increased, but actually with increased imports and reduced exports, the debts have increased rather than the reserves. The second reform, privatization. The definition of privatization could be the process of handing over or transferring the ownership and management of industrial units under state ownership to private sector. That means the process or the method in which the state owned, that means the government owned industrial units are transferred to the private people, either the ownership or management or both. That means the process of handing over or transferring the ownership and or management of industrial units under state ownership to the private people. That means government companies are sold to private companies. Simple. Privatization means converting government companies into private companies. What are the steps taken for the privatization? The first step, the areas reserved for public sector. There were certain areas which were reserved for public sector, for example, railways, defense, atomic. They are still under public sector reservation, but remaining sectors like communication, TV, chemicals, vehicles, etc. have been made open for the private sector to undertake. Second, state keeps the ownership of state-owned companies under its control and gives charge of its management to private people. That's the first thing. Or state keeps management in its own hand but sells the ownership shares to the private people. Or the third option is that sometimes ownership as well as the management both are transferred to the private sector enterprises. That means the government sells the whole and soul of the companies to the private people. What are the advantages of the privatization? The first advantage of privatization, that there is an increase in the numbers of production units in industrial sector. Because the privatization is there, more people are producing, more people are establishing the production units in the industries. The second advantage, that the production has been increased in industries with huge capitals and consumable commodities. That means the consumable commodities as well as industries in which huge capitals were invested, the production in these things have increased tremendously. Because government is not producing them, the private people, the people of the country are producing them. That means more and more number of production units has been established and they are using huge capitals and producing consumable commodities. Consumable commodities means commodities which general public use for our own selves. The working capacity of the public sector has improved due to competition from private sector. The public sector means government companies, the private sector means private companies. Just take an example that before BSNL was the whole and soul in the communication sector. Then with the starting of Reliance, the BSNL's working improved because it faced competition from the Reliance Communication. So Reliance Communication is a private sector, BSNL is a public sector. So with the emergence of the private sector, public sector got competition and it also improved its working capacity. The disadvantages of the privatization can be that the economic power has been centralized in the hands of few giants due to the privatization. That means the economic power, the power to buy, the power to control has been centralized in the few hands of giant companies rather than becoming decentralized, and this has increased the evil of monopoly. The second, the cottage industries have not actually received proper fruits of the privatization, because the cottage industries actually got crushed due to the privatization, and it is a disadvantage for the small scale and cottage industries. The prices has not been controlled properly. When it was in the hands of government could control the prices, but in the privatization, prices are controlled by the private people, so they have not been controlled, resulting in heavy price rise and inflation. The third point, the third reform, the globalization. As you can see in the picture here, the process of connecting economy of a single country with the economy of world is the definition of globalization. That means each and every country of the world trade with each and every other country of the world, creating a global market. That means the country, a single nation, is connected with the whole globe. What were the steps taken in the globalization? The first step, the obstacles of trade between two nations has been removed. That means whatever problems were there, whatever obstacles were there in the trading of the nations, those have been removed properly. Second, conditions for easy capital exchange between two countries has been created. Such conditions have been created so that the capital, the money, the assets, the goods and technology could exchange between two countries easily. Obstacles in the way of exchange of technology has been removed. Any problem where technology could not be exchanged, those problems have been removed. And last one, the free exchange of labor is there between different nations of the world. That means the different nations of the world can exchange their labor. Labor means people. So India's people go to Australia and America and Canada and so many different countries to work, and similarly people from many countries come to India for the same kind of work. So that's an exchange of labor. What are the advantages of the globalization? The very first advantage, that the foreign direct investment, in short FDI, is encouraged due to globalization. That means the global companies, the foreign companies directly invest in our Indian companies or Indian market. That is called foreign direct investment, in short FDI. The goods produced in developed countries can easily be obtained. That means goods of America or England or China or Canada or Australia, the goods of superior quality we can obtain just sitting at our homes actually. Next, developing countries like India can withstand international competition. That means countries like India which are still developing, we can learn to withstand the international competition and emerge victorious in that tug of war. What are the disadvantages? And it seems there are many disadvantages of globalization. The first one, that the expected success of globalization which we believed that we will have has not been attained. In finding the solutions to the problems like poverty and unemployment at the level which we assumed that the poverty and unemployment will be eradicated have not happened. Rather, sometimes it seems the poverty and unemployment has increased. Developing countries have not actually acquired the fruits of globalization. Rather, the developed countries have prospered a lot more, and sometimes the developing countries have gone into the negative value because the developed countries suck away the resources of the developing countries. Large scale industries have benefited a lot more than the small scale industries, as the large scale industries have the resources to export goods which small scale industries does not have. The last point, cottage and small scale industries have actually faced crisis by facing international competition, because international competitive goods of a lot higher quality and at a lot cheaper prices, destroy the market of cottage and small scale industries, which has a good handmade goods, but they might be a lot costly than the international goods. So international competition has destroyed the cottage and small scale industries of India. Moving on towards the organization which actually controls the global trade in all over the world, that is World Trade Organization, in short WTO, and this is the headquarter of the World Trade Organization, which was established on 1st January 1995, and it is located in Geneva, Switzerland. And this picture is the main gate of the headquarter of World Trade Organization. Let us start with the objectives of the World Trade Organization, the reason why it was established, or what is it supposed to do in the world. The first one, to remove obstacles influencing global trade. That means any problems are there in the global trade, remove them. Number two, to remove protection policy given to industries of country for foreign trade. That means if any country has given any kind of protection to its industries against the foreign trade, remove those protections so that every country can trade with every country without any restrictions. Number three, to coordinate between global trade policy and economic policy. That means to connect the economic policy of a nation and the global trade policy of the world so that they can move together. The fourth one, to solve the trade related issues arising in the world. That means if any problems are there in the world related to trade at the world level, then WTO will interfere and try to solve it. What are its functions? What does it actually do? Let's see whether it does whatever the objectives told it to do. The number one thing, to set up required structure for implementing the implementation of agreement related to trade. That means any agreements at the world level which were done related to trade, the WTO tries to set up a structure so that those agreements can be implemented at the world level. Number two, it plays a very vital, very important role in the debating and the negotiations for the multinational trade. That means if any problems are there regarding any country, regarding the multinational trade, it helps in the negotiation between the countries and tries to debate with them and come at a conclusion which ultimately advantages the multinational trade, the international trade. Third one, it encourages unbiased national trade. That means it does not say that we prefer a certain country, we does not prefer a certain country. It's a different thing whether it actually does or not. But according to its function, it tries unbiased, impartial trade between the various nations. Last one, the different nations follow their own national policies. Every nation has their own policies. So WTO tries to observe those national policies and then suggest if certain adjustments, the improvements are there in it or not, and accordingly works properly. So these are the objectives and the functions of the World Trade Organization. Now, what has been the impact of WTO on the economy of India? That means how India's economy has changed due to the World Trade Organization. Now, India's contribution in World Trade, which was 0.5% before joining the World Trade Organization, has increased to 1% after being the member of the World Trade Organization. Being a member of WTO, our exports of clothes have increased tremendously. Then, being a member of WTO, our exports of agricultural product has also increased. That means we were backward in agriculture sector, which has been developed a lot. With increase in the exports, the pressure on imports have reduced, as our imports were more before and now our exports are more, and thus our foreign investments have increased in foreign exchange. That means because our income is more, we can invest in other countries through our commodities and goods and all that. Sustainable development. Now, this is a term which you should remember because it is going to be used in the future a lot. Let us see what is the definition of sustainable development given by UNESCO. Sustainable development is the development which meets the needs of the present generation without compromising with the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In a nutshell, it just says that whatever needs we have right now, we should fulfill those needs using the natural resources available in the environment, but we should not destroy those natural resources. As such, our future generations cannot meet their own needs. That means we should meet our needs without destroying the chances that our future generation cannot meet their own needs. So that is the sustainable development, developing present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to develop themselves. So remember this definition verbatim, word to word, because it is a very important definition asked so many times. Let us watch a quick 2 to 3 minute video on the sustainable development and what does it mean.
Sustainable development. Everybody's talking about it. But what do those two words really mean? Let's take a couple of minutes to see what sustainable development is all about. The idea first emerged in the late 1980s as a response to the world's growing social and environmental problems. With globalization, the inequality gap between rich and poor countries is widening every day, and the projections for population growth are alarming. How are we going to feed a total of 9 billion people in 2050? How can we offer everyone access to clean drinking water, healthcare, education? How can we protect biodiversity and take concrete action against climate change? How can we make sure that industrial development means progress for everyone? The proposed solution was a new kind of development, or rather a variation of the traditional model called, quite simply, sustainable development. The term was officially defined in 1987 as part of the preparations for the Rio Earth Summit. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Does that sound a little abstract to you? Let's put it this way. Sustainable development means that growth must be accomplished with respect for nature and humankind. And where is sustainability achieved? Right here, at the crossroads of economic goals, social responsibility, and environmental protection. Now, are you wondering whether a company can combine respect for the environment, social equity, and commercial success? Well, the answer is yes. Not only that, but sustainable development creates value. Here's how. Upgrading production tools to use less energy and water is good for the environment and for the pocketbook. Offering eco-designed products and packaging that use just what's necessary saves materials and reduces shipping costs. Paying attention to employees, improving their quality of life at work, and helping them develop their skills all serve to strengthen their engagement. And stronger employee engagement means better overall performance. Creating products that are accessible to the world's poorest populations means opening new markets, the ones whose populations are going to grow the fastest between now and 2050. Monitoring the working conditions offered by suppliers and subcontractors means minimizing risks that could damage the company's image. As you can see, sustainable development affects just about everything. More and more companies today understand that they have important economic, social, and environmental responsibilities and are committed to making a difference. The ones that seize this opportunity to create value will find that their success is, in a word, sustainable.
Let's see the strategy for conservation and preservation of natural resources. What is the strategy to conserve and to preserve our natural resources in the world? Let's see one by one. The renewable resources should be used so that their quality is maintained. For example, solar energy, wind energy, wood, tidal energy. And non-renewable resources must be used with extra care. That means the resources which cannot be renewed, for example, thermal energy, then it should be used with extra care. The industrial locations should be decided on the basis of lesser transportation cost. That means the locations should be such that they have a least transportation cost possible, and the industrial locations must be made eco-friendly. That means with a lot of greenery and with the least amount of pollution possible, whether it's air, water or earth. The resources with more than one kind of use, there are such resources which has more than one kind of use, which we call alternative uses, should be utilized in more than one ways. Example, different irrigation systems used for more than one purpose. Okay, so those resources with alternative uses should be used as such for the maximum utilization, for the maximum returns and the minimum pollution. The process of industrial waste treatment you can see here. So the natural resources must not be wasted. Control on the disposal of industrial waste, poisonous chemicals and slums, etc. should be maintained. That means the industrial waste should be processed properly. The poisonous chemicals should be done away with without endangering the environment. The slums should be maintained such that they don't destroy the environment. So basically natural resources must not be wasted. More and more use of non-conventional energy resources like tidal energy, wind energy, solar energy, geothermal energy must be advocated. That means must be suggested. Example are solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, tidal, etc. The steps taken to protect environment. These are the list of steps which have been taken so that we can protect our environment. The first Earth Conference was organized in 1972 at Stockholm, Sweden for the protection and conservation of environment, and after that many such conferences at global level have been organized. This picture is one of the most memorable pictures from the Earth Conference taken during that time. The government of India has been making following efforts at national level, because India is a nation, so we are working at just a national level. For the protection and conservation of environment, we can see that the information about pollution condition of different cities of nation is presented. That means there is a list of cities according to ranking with the most polluted and the least polluted cities, so we can understand that which city, which state has the maximum amount of pollution, which city, which state is most green in the nation. So accordingly, to compete between the cities and the states, we can hope to achieve a green nation soon. Central and state pollution control boards have been established. These boards' work is to control the pollution in the city and states, to prepare a guideline and make sure that the companies and industries follow those pollution control guidelines properly. 5th June has been declared as World Environment Day. So what we need to do is to celebrate that day as the World Environment Day and try to come up with various ways to save our environment throughout the year till the next World Environment Day. Indian government passed an act, that is Air Pollution Control Act, in 1981. The objective of this act was to control the pollution emission into the environment by the various industries, to make it to the minimum level possible so that excessive pollution does not deteriorate the air water and earth in the nation. And the last step taken was international agreements have been made with other nations also. India has been a part of many such international agreements for the disposal of atomic waste, for stopping the degradation of environment, etc., etc., many things. So this the chapter of economic liberalization and globalization started with the three economic reforms: liberalization, privatization, globalization. Then we studied the World Trade Organization. What is it? When was it established? The objectives and the functions and the impact of World Trade Organization on India. Then we ended the chapter with the steps taken for the preservation and the conservation of the environment, the sustainable development, and what steps India has taken for the same thing. I hope you guys liked this chapter properly. You have understood it, I assume. In case you have any doubts, you can just re-watch this particular chapter, which I have tried with many images and explanation and animation and video, so that it becomes a lot interesting. Next time I will catch you with the next chapter, that is chapter number 17. So stay tuned for that. Welcome students to Vitan's Unacount Academy. That's better way to success for you. I am Vitan Vora and I teach accountancy, statistics and social science. You can contact me on my cell number 919426310184. Please give a sub to my channel and also check out my other video playlist which you can see on the screen. Thank you and I will see you in the next video.